Muhumuza. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We would like to understand that World Bank has announced withholding funding to our country. Assuming you are the president of Uganda, Professor, how would you go about the situation? What would you do to circumvent the problems that are likely to befall our country as a result of this decision?
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Dr. Fred Muhumuza. We have learned of the decision of the World Bank to withhold future funding, not the existing funding from the different government programs. Now, when you look through what are the areas the bank normally finances, the bulk of their funding goes to maybe 4 or 5 sectors. You're looking at human capital development, which is education and health. You're looking at construction of infrastructure, both roads and also energy transmission, but also there's a component that goes into ICT infrastructure. You're also looking at funding for agriculture. Now, when you consider some of those aspects, they are central to the growth of the economy. And even though the decision is to really withhold future funding, it has implications that are immediate. One is because a number of these projects were already coming to an end, and we expect it to be reviewed, and conversations were already going on. We already had programs scheduled, like for the renovation of Greater Kampala roads infrastructure. That program was almost going to the board. No, not just KCCA, because there are also places beyond KCCA, Greater Kampala, and these roads really need to be worked on. But also there are other indications, like the municipal project, which has been working on supporting USMID, supporting the infrastructure in these municipalities. That is also supposed to have come to an end of this calendar year, and was supposed to be presented for approval and extension, really, to bring in more money, because we have additional cities that have come up which were not benefiting from the other one, but also the current one. Some of them need additional resources. Now, these, you're not just discussing the project. There are two implications of this. One is when you invest this money in these projects, you create a situation that facilitates investments elsewhere. Say when you do a road, when you transmit electricity, when you distribute electricity, when you treat people, when you educate children, there are implications across all areas of the economy that this is your enabler of all the other activities. So that is likely to be affected going forward. But also you're looking at private sector who have been participating in the construction and spending of this money, the utilization. Now, some of these private sector entities actually took loans from financial institutions. Now, if the cut comes in, some of these private sector entities have borrowed loans of, say, 3-4 years, knowing we shall be still implementing a World Bank project or funded project for 3 years, so I can service my loan. Now, if that does not come through, then the banks are going to also experience non-performing assets. These private sector companies will go down, or at least will begin to struggle. So there are quite a number of implications that one needs to be looking into. We also know that there are people who come to Uganda because the World Bank is here, or because the World Bank program is running. You want to come and set up your factory somewhere. You know, I'm processing grain, value addition, as we've been talking about it. But somebody will be happy knowing that the World Bank has an agricultural credit or support program to agriculture, the ACDP project, that when I need produce, it will actually come through. Because you are not investing in agriculture yourself, you are investing in processing and trading of agriculture. Now, all those people will begin to wonder what is going to happen to the supply of the raw material that they pick from agriculture. So you begin to see that a number of private actors are going to rethink their decisions. So to get back to your question, with that context, where do you cut? Already we have a very tight budget in Uganda, because 30 to 40% of our budget already goes into management of debt service related activities. You have another bigger portion, possibly 20% or so, that's about 7 point something trillion in the current year's budget, that is supposed to go to salaries and wages. Now, we have just increased the wages of scientists, the wages of the soldiers, and maybe a few other people. Can you cut those? That's why it becomes difficult. That's why it becomes difficult. And quite often we say once wages are increased, they should not be reduced. That's why we're always very conscious not to increase wages, because once you put them up, you cannot bring them back. So you want to look at that situation and say, if that be the situation, you can't cut wages. But now you can get into downsizing the number of employees. Having fewer people, you can retain the wages. Now the people you have laid off means you can make a saving. Of course, they are what we call laying off costs. Some of them you'll be terminating their costs, some of them you have to give them their benefits. But those, you look at them, they are short term. Rather than pay you for a whole year, 12 months, let me give you a terminal benefits for the next 3 months and we part. So that is one area to look into. But also there are other fixed costs and overheads within institutions. They are renting. So when you wind up an institution, it means the rental charges go out. Apart from the employees, as we've said, they have also gone out. You also want to rationalize the government fleet. There are too many vehicles of government. You can add that to your salaries of employees, like private sector companies. They just pay and then you find your way to office. So you can also do that to the civil service. Say for categories below this, you would not have a vehicle. However, we will add a top up on your salary. Now you save in two ways. One is now this person is going to manage themselves. You don't have to have a vehicle fleet management cost as government. But also knowing very well that we have a lot of corruption in garages where government vehicles go and they are repaired at inflated rates. Again, you are saving yourself the burden. So these are some critical areas that can easily be handled. I think these don't have to wait that far. They can easily be identified, they can easily be immediate. Already we have been in a restructuring program which has already gone through so many stages. You can accelerate that. You can also come back and say, how else can we deliver certain services? You still have a number of districts, each one with a district service commission, many of them. You have councillors. You want to rationalize and say, can we now get to the reality of what is in the constitution, the regional tier? What services can be delivered from one place and the different districts benefit from that? We also still have things like district hospitals. Some districts are really so small, they can share a hospital. So you want to change policy and the implementation of that policy. The whole notion and idea of having a primary school in every parish. Some parishes are really small. We have seen parishes with the 2,000 households. Now that means if it has 2,000 households, how many children are in there? You may find the total number of children by our household expenditures. If the family size is now 5, then there are 3 children. Now some of these children may not be going to primary school, either because they are 0 to 5 or they are past 16. So, past 12 years or 13 years. So that means you want also to go back to the realities and say, where do I put a primary school? Where do I put a secondary school? So there are quite a number of things that we need to look into without even complaining on what is the World Bank doing to us. But also, as the President has mentioned, you also want to go back and try to negotiate with the World Bank, especially certain lines of funding. It's unfortunate that it was blanket suspension. You want to get into those humanitarian areas. You want to get into areas with what economists call bigger multiplier effects. Can these be spared while we talk? So those are some of the areas that I think we can have. You're looking at healthcare, because healthcare, if government doesn't, a household must. Now you run a danger of, if a family gets a sick person, they are going to sell the cow. Which cow or goat was supposed to be part of their wealth creation agenda to get out of poverty? So they begin to take steps backwards because they must sell this goat. They must sell maize which they have harvested. Instead of buying new land or replanting the new maize, they have to sell it to get money to go and treat a child or to pay school fees. So you want to say, how do we preserve human capital development, especially at that basic education level? How do we preserve, so that is health, that's education. How do we preserve the road construction we can scale it down. You don't have to do first class tarmac roads, because you want roads to be motorable. So the grading, putting of maram and maybe some other versions of tarmac to keep the roads motorable, because movement of goods, people and services is dependent on roads and has huge implications across the economy. Because as we all know, whenever international prices for petrol rise, costs increase everywhere. So if the road network is going to impact on an increase in cost of transporting people and goods, that will definitely affect the economic growth. So you want to go back and say, Mr. World Bank or Mrs. World Bank, whoever you are, I know this will pass and we'll get back to our mutual understanding. So can we plan for that day to make sure we do not lose the gains we have already made together? Even when you are brothers, even as you're fighting, you don't break off your brother's arm, because you know tomorrow you'll need it. So you may want to put that into consideration and begin some conversations as fast as is possible.
Professor, do you think, would you follow World Bank at all? Is their decision justifiable at all?
I think that is another debate which is subjective. They will say based on their values and policies. Now values can be debated. You get to a place where somebody will say, for us here, marrying girls of 15 years is okay, because even the age of consent varies across the world. Some countries it is 16, some countries it is 18, others may even be higher. So now you begin to see that the laws that govern the world are not uniform. Now, but somehow we must find conformity within those laws in order to exist and coexist, as they say, unity in diversity. So the World Bank have read their script and said, hey, whatever you are doing there, we think, and this is where the area for discussion comes in. They are saying, we think this might be discriminatory. We haven't found the evidence that it will be discriminatory. And that's why I think people should have first come up with evidence to say the implementation of the law, we have evidence that it is actually discriminatory. You don't say, I think it is going to be discriminatory, and you act. So for me, that is one area of conversation. But also I think as soon as the law was signed, even before it was signed, we knew, because the World Bank is not pulling out a new script. This has been their script. We knew we were headed there. It is just that we did not prepare adequately for the consequences, either through conversations or through reviewing the law. And I remember, I think it was in Changwanzi when the president was addressing a group of MPs, he said, the World Bank person has rang me and says there are certain clauses, which I also agree, need to be reviewed. So maybe they are trying to preempt us to speed up that process of review, because it looks like Uganda itself agrees that within the law there are certain clauses that they think went beyond the bar. So they might be saying, you told us this 3 months ago, we don't see any activity. Can we act on it? So I think there is room for both parties to owe up and be able to say, can we begin the conversations? Because as we've said, we're still going to be partners. We are member shareholders in the World Bank, small shareholder. Every country is 0 point something, of course. There are big players there. But the other big players, some of them don't benefit from the World Bank to a critical level that we do. Because it was set up as a bank for construction. So it kind of supports more of countries like us. It might also support countries like India because they have certain extremes. Because the World Bank agenda is now the extreme poor and leaving no one behind. I think that's where they are coming from. To say if I bring my program and some people are going to be left behind. Now we haven't checked whether in reality anybody is being left behind. Because as we have said, is looking at the areas where they are funding, it is hard to exclude anybody. Done a road. If I have done a bridge, I have not seen any roadblocks in Uganda to say the tall or the short, the pink, they must not cross here. So there are certain areas where we can come and say, where exactly is your fear? Where is the concern? I hear you, but let's sit and discuss where is the evidence. Let's not use imagination and assumptions on matters of life and death, because these are matters of life and death. So that's for me is the area that we can get into, and we can say for such health, education of children, can we agree to continue and maybe with the road infrastructure? We can downgrade certain aspects of that component, but what must we keep? Road maintenance is very, very key. I hear everybody wants a tarmac road, but the road doesn't have to be tarmac.
Yes.
For you to move, it just has to be motorable all the year round. That can be a maram road.
Yes.
So when you have limited resources, spend them on as many kilometers to make them motorable all the year round, rather than spending on very few kilometers to make them as comfortable. And then when I get off the comfortable road, I find completely no road at all. We call it a road network, meaning the good and the bad are part of that network. So the agenda should be improving the road network. From the woman who has a goat, the man who is selling melon, to the market person who wants to buy it. Now, some of these are on trunk roads by UNRWA, others are district roads, others are community roads. So you need a road network that is motorable. So that's the conversation we can have, and so we can revisit even some loans. We might even ask for revisiting existing loans since they are not affected. So now the 4.5 to 5 trillion billion dollars that you have already deployed, can I move it around in the meantime? That flexibility should come through. I intended to do a transmission line, but I haven't gotten access of way, because I need to first compensate the land acquisition. And I don't think that is going to be in my budget going by the current developments. So why don't you allow me to move that money to cover the other gap of a project that was ending? I had planned to give it to you, but now you have indicated that I shouldn't come, like Kampala roads and other road maintenance programs. Allow me to move money from construction of transmission lines of electricity into road construction. That's another conversation we can really have with them. We are not debating your future, but how do I move my chairs around now that here is flooding, but we all need to move there? That's another area that I think we can open up conversations on.
Professor, if they are to stick to their position and decide to say we are not coming back, is it possible? Can this country do without them, without World Bank? Are they replaceable? Can we get this money from other sources if they are to live forever?
There are two things you're speaking to. One is, can they be replaced? The answer is no. You cannot replace the World Bank program in Uganda with the same, without having some negative implications or shortfalls, for many reasons really. They are one of the entities, their peer would be the African Development Bank, the ADB. But the ADB is already committed. It's not that it was waiting to come to Uganda, it's already in Uganda. It has already committed its resources. It doesn't have an unlimited source of funds. So it can't, for example, bring you an extra 1 billion in the next 1 year, which you are going to possibly lose off by that. So that is not a replacement. And wherever else you go, you won't find somebody lending to you at 0.75%, which is what the World Bank is giving you a grace period of 5 or 10 years, allowing you to pay back in 38 years. So when you look at those contexts, you cannot replace them. Now, can we live on? Of course we are going to live on, but certainly in a worse off situation than what it would have been living with the World Bank. One is you are going to move on. You have seen already the dollar is trending upwards.
As a result of this pronouncement?
As a result of this pronouncement, because that raises anxiety and it raises uncertainty. So for people who are planning to buy dollars in 1 month or 2, they were relying on World Bank funding continuously coming in, because it comes in dollars. And as we try to build a school in Wikwe, do a bridge in Otuke, you convert it into shillings. Now, meaning the private people who wanted to buy dollars and go and import their phones, buy a car, bring drugs, cement, whatever else, fly abroad for school, they are buying those dollars, supplied by the World Bank loan. So the dollar becomes affordable because there is that steady supply. Besides our own exports, which can be erratic, there is that steady supply of dollars that will come and sit in the central bank. Now, without that, people begin to panic. that the shilling might lose value. I might need more shillings to buy the dollar if I wait
So
for September. It's actually a caution. You're not even, yeah, because a speculator would say, let me buy it now and sell it next week when it is higher. But this one is buying genuinely to go and pay fees. To go and pay fees. So they are front loading a lot of activities before the dry season strikes. But that alone pushes the dollar up and makes a lot of uncertainty. Me and you may not know the significance of a dollar moving by 100 shillings. Some people don't even notice those boards in the streets of Kampala. You pass and you just say, those are dollar people. But if you really are looking at somebody who is buying $1 million and it moves by 100 shillings, 100 times the $1 million, this guy is going to need an extra, possibly 100 million Uganda shillings to get the same dollar he would have got yesterday. Where do you find 100 million shillings? That could even be your profit for the whole year. So when it gets to those levels, you begin to see the gravity of why you want a stable currency.
So the alternative would be ADB.
ODB is not an alternative, as we've said, because the ADB is already with us. It's like somebody already has his bicycle and is riding it. You cannot say it is available for you.
Okay.
Whatever ADB wanted to commit, and this country, these banks really commit over a span of maybe 3 years. So you say over the next 3 years, I'm going to give you money for this much in these programs, and we sign on it. So if you go to ADB, they have already committed resources that they planned for Uganda. There is no bank that would keep money there uncommitted, because it doesn't make you money. So whichever money you mobilize from your shareholders, you commit it. Which is the same conversation when people mistake the National Social Security Fund. When they hear it is 17 trillion, they say, why can't we use that money? But it's committed.
It's not available.
It's not available that it is behind the MD's desk.
Yes.
He has already committed it either in housing, he has committed it in government papers, he has invested in shares in MTN, in Umeme. It is not available for you to put in. So all the alternatives you're going to be looking at, you'll be trying to go to banks in Asia. Because the European banks you are going to maybe are of the same mind as the World Bank. Now when you go to the banks in Asia, chances are you are a new entrant. No relationship. So you are going to have teething problems of understanding each other. But also some of these banks you'll find they have their own criteria. We lend in infrastructure, but a certain kind of infrastructure. They are also going to come and say, but what is the risk profile of Uganda? What is the probability that you will pay this loan? What is your governance? What is all sorts of questions like any banker would question. That process is not like, oh, my wife left me yesterday, I'm going to find another wife tomorrow. Either that wife you already had her as number 2 or 3, or it's going to you are going to bring a Malaya or a temporary one, but not that will not be called a wife. So we cannot just switch on and then we move on to another space and think we will run. So people should not even be looking and saying we can find other money.
That's why Museveni is being cautious.
He's being cautious, yes, and he has to be measured. While people are pushing and saying we can survive without World Bank loans. Of course we can. It's possible to survive. That when thieves come and steal my clothes, I don't die. But I'm going to have one cloth, I will survive.
Yes.
I can cook from a neighbor's place, I will survive. When floods come, people from Bududa survived. But in a very hostile environment. And stabilizing the new environment can take you time. You might not even succeed.
You may not succeed.
You may settle for what economists would call a low-level equilibrium. You have stabilized, but at a lower level. This person lost his job, he has stabilized, he has found another low-income job. He's coping, but he's not going to go back to his house in Nigeria.
Okay.
He's now going to live in a house in Matuga. You will not die, but certainly something has changed, and we need to be looking through those implications. There are other things at individual level. We know banks have given people, as we talked about, contractors loans. You've been working in a World Bank project. They are paying you 10 million. These are some of the best paying projects. They are paying you 7 million. You have ability of vehicles and doing other allowances. Now, if the project is not renewed and it was ending, remember you took a loan from a bank based on that salary. So you have been paying 2.5 million every month because your salary is 12. Now if this ends, where are you going to get the 2 million? So both are going to suffer. The bank that lent you the money and you yourself, your asset might go because the collateral you put there was the loan. And both of you and the bank said, well, I'm in this project, but I have been in this project. This is the third phase of World Bank funding. Anybody will interpret and say, in the second phase, you are likely to be part of it as well. Because phase 1, I was there, Nusaf. Phase 2, Nusaf, I'm here. Phase 3, Nusaf, I am here. Now they are preparing phase 4. So nobody can make a fair judgment and say, fine, take a loan, you're going to be there. Now all of a sudden, we get to the cliff, no more roads. You're either falling in the lake, or we have to retrace our steps. So you have to begin to look at the implications of this. Is not just the 4-5 trillion, billion dollars. It's not just about the specific projects. It has implications across the entire economy. And I find it unfortunate that many of us are thinking of it as a simple, petty exercise. We are becoming emotional, we have our values. Yes, we do. But you can die with your values. You can literally die.
Can it cause some political problems for the country?
Of course it can, but Uganda has gone through a history of political unrest and managing it. And also Ugandans have a different tendency. We are not like Kenyans where prices will rise and you blame the president. Like Kenya, Raila saying Ruto is responsible for high increase. Ugandans are a little bit more appreciative of the things that can come from the president and which therefore you want the president to be responsible for. There are things that we know invade us generally, and we need the president to take lead, but he's not the person you want to blame. But being a president, take lead and see how do we get out of this. So people of course will have tensions, but they will appreciate. Neither does the president have a solution on this. Just like we went through the phase of fuel prices increasing, and everybody expected government to subsidize. Kenya did, they are suffering. We had conversations with Museveni who said we cannot. And I'm glad he didn't, and he still explains to people, this is beyond me. If the price of cooking oil is rising, if the price of wheat, chapati is rising, he has told people go and eat cassava. We have it here. So because you also appreciate, it might look like he's sensitive, but what is the option? He's speaking the truth, but in a rude way. But that's the only way you communicate. You go to a doctor, he says, man, this is an injection. Lower your pants. It's going to be painful, but what does the doctor do? So certain things will get there, and I expect that Ugandans would be more appreciative and understanding. After all, it is so many Ugandans who are anchored and rooted on these values. They are saying homosexuality, not in our country. So it comes with consequences. So it will be easier for the president to say, you asked me. We all agreed it's going to have implications. So it was a collective decision. Here it is. But as we say, even when the consequences are collective, how do we collectively find a collective solution which is mutually agreeable to us and our partners? And that is why we expect the president to take lead. Yes, we expect the president to take lead, because not many Ugandans can meet the World Bank. But the president through his teams can.
Where else has this ever happened? In Uganda, for instance, is this happening for the first time, or it has happened before?
We have had the World Bank discontinue funding in some areas. It hasn't been that massive. As we said, sometimes they do it calculatively, sometimes they zoom in on a project, and many other donors have done it before. Remember the scandal in office of the Prime Minister, 2012, a lot of loans were withdrawn, but also had a road a road going into Fort Portal, where during the construction they did not protect the locals. People impregnated them, there were women abuse and all sorts of things. The same thing here is social factors really. So Kamweng, I think, to Fort Portal there is that road, and the road, the funding was suspended. The government of Uganda had to look for alternative ways. So this is not the first time we find ourselves at loggerheads with the principles and practices of the World Bank.
Was the cost the same, sir?
No, it wasn't, of course. Of course, there you are cutting off one road. But now where you're saying the entire program is on hold, that's why I'm saying the first conversation we want to have with the World Bank is really in the existing portfolio, which you have not suspended, what can we change? That's number one. Now, in the future portfolio, which you are suspending, what aspects can we protect? Have some continuity. We don't want to lose gains in sustaining some of these activities. Then the rest we can have our conversation. So those are the kinds of, for me, the two immediate areas: revisiting the current portfolio and getting no objections to move money from one set of projects to another set of projects, and then walking into the future portfolio to say what lines should we protect on humanitarian grounds. The World Bank itself has been so keen on investing in areas with refugees. Now, why are refugees from South Sudan going to suffer? If you were committed to making sure refugees, which is a global right, refugees have a right to leave their country if it is bad and find a better place. So now why are we infringing on the rights of, as Uganda would put it, Sarumanya and Narumanya? These refugees have nothing to do with the laws in Uganda, but the decision is going to impact on them as well. So you want to get into those areas and say, can we preserve the lines of refugees? Can we preserve the lines of health? And even health, you can really open up and say maternal health, infant HIV, child health. Let's not affect these particular lines. The purchase of drugs. I don't mind getting my treatment under a tree or under a tent, but can I get the treatment? So we can really open up that box and see how do we proceed. Yep.
Professor, very finally, there are people who have imagined this for China. Why do you think China would not be a solution?
Because we have been to China. Before, people forget one of our biggest portfolio beside the World Bank is China. And China is the biggest in terms of cost. Because China has given us money for 20 years, the World Bank is 38. China will charge you a rate that is much higher than the World Bank. So it's not a solution because we have already had China. And we already have China in one way or another. But also China, you are looking at the China not of 10 years ago, not of 5 years ago. The global economy and the geopolitics has changed. China is also beginning to say, how do I rescue myself to avoid a deterioration? So you're looking at a China that is reorienting its lines of thinking because its growth is being affected by its friction with the West. And also it also needs to support its peers. Its agenda is on BRICS. They want to secure the BRICS agenda, but also China supports those immediate to it. You have 1.3 billion people. You don't want a poor country in your neighborhood, especially when this poor country is Indonesia with 200 million people. If 10% walk over the border, that's 20 million. Something that the Americans haven't done well. They keep trying to cross the southern border and close it. The solution would be go and make sure Latin America develops so that people don't find need to leave their country to cross the border. So America thinks I can always erect a wall. A hungry person is an angry one. People are desperate. They will swim across a river, they will walk through forests, they will do anything. So the best way is what I find in the Asian countries. Japan, China, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, all of them, they will make sure everybody is fairly comfortable. The neighbors are politically and economically. So you have Cambodia, everybody wants to make sure Cambodia is fixed. Laos, you want to make sure is fixed. You have Vietnam, you want to make sure Vietnam is comfortable. And so that has helped them. So China, even as they have an agenda that you can go and knock on, globally they will be looking at BRICS. Regionally, they will be trying to say, how else do we support our neighbors? I've read programs and reviewed programs where the World Bank was building roads, long bridges, tunnels in neighboring countries. Aid, grants, not loans. One is because it knows people there can be settled there. In fact, some of the factories of China have shifted to these countries. Let them work in their own area and only send me finished products or semi-finished products so that we share the prosperity that is emerging in the region. If you are going to just be there and say, me, I'm the United States, I will turn guns and put electric fences, these are human beings, they will still come over. So we cannot just look at China and say this is the China of 2015 and 2010. You have to put that into context. First of all, their lending program would not match the World Bank, both in terms of lending and magnitude and focus. We have not seen China here come too much into health, into education, into water. They have largely been in roads and maybe power dams. That's their policy. That's why they are looking at, because for them they want to engage raw materials. China has been the manufacturing hub for the world. So they want to get raw materials, process them, manufacture things and sell. So I'm not about educating your children. But if you do well with the roads I've built for you, you can find money to educate your children. But the World Bank will say both. We need to bring them up. So that's the whole dicey space that we cannot wake up and say we are going to find alternatives. That talk is not helpful. Yes.
We expect the court to make a decision. Do you think that could be our solution in case they invalidate the law and
when is making the decision? Because I think when people submitted, they were also, we read about others saying, no, my affidavit, I did not agree to it. So I don't know whether there are still not matters of substance and other technicalities to deal with before you even get to the matters of substance. But the president had already indicated he will be engaging people to take it back to clean up some of these. Now you may want not just the petitioners who are saying strike the entire law, because the others were saying strike it. Now court also may want to say, no, let's wait and see somebody make a proposal. And you know, court can't solicit. It can't move itself. So it will be waiting for somebody to walk in and say, this law, check with the Constitutional Court. This law, check here. And I think there are many laws. I've seen the Minister of Health issue a statement to say we do not discriminate. Anybody who comes to us, we have confidentiality. If somebody comes and has been injured and I can clearly see this is as a result of acts of homosexuality or gay or lesbian, whatever it is, a doctor, I'm supposed to treat this person and subject myself to my ethical code of conduct. But now put yourself into this doctor's position. This is simply a medical ethical code. It is not to the same level as a law. So me, I can go and sue that doctor, not because of his codes, I don't know, I don't mind, and say, this doctor have evidence. He treated the gay person. The law says when you find one, inform the authorities. He did not. So you are also putting your own doctors in a very precarious situation. Now that could be a matter somebody may want on from the medical fraternity to go to court and say, this is curtailing our ability to do our work as per our training. Serve and save. I have people now whom I'm required to disclose what they told me behind the consultation room. And yet my medical practice prevents me from doing that. So I'm unable to deliver to certain categories of people comfortably and remain within the law. You want to have that case presented. Now, which other cases do we need to present? Mr. Museveni and the World Bank official has indicated there was a requirement that when a landlord gets to know that the person I rented my house to is gay, I must report. But at the same time, we are saying, the law is not against homosexuals. If homosexuals are doing their thing in private and not spreading it, the law is against spreading it. But now I have known these guys, they are not spreading it. They are doing it in private. They have gone ahead to rent a house to do their thing inside there. Now me as a landlord, I get to know. Where does that leave me? Their thing, not spreading, but the law says I need to report. So there are those contradictions within the law, and I think we need to have them identified to say, let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. Can we sit and sort out? The bucket is stinking because babies do poop in the water, in the nappies, that's why we bathe them. But please don't say the bucket is so stinking today, take it out. See, the baby is still in it. So those are, for me, I think the World Bank is looking for urgent action in those. So these positions may be to pressure the government of Uganda, not necessarily to strike out the law, But to say go and improve on it, let's make sure any clauses that imply discrimination are struck out. Then you can still proceed with your values. But also we are saying, are there no other laws that can deliver the same? So you also want a law reform commission or any other lawyer to go and check and say, by the way, this law is intended to deliver X, Y, and Z. I have reviewed existing laws. These laws deliver exactly the same thing. So I think sometimes we don't have to be emotional. You don't have to be too passionate. I mean, I may have the right of way, but I can't remain passionate when I see an errant driver coming to knock me and I say, but it is me with the right of way. The green is for me. You see the other fellow is coming. You've seen a border enter. So you don't want to be, you have to have reasonableness. You have to have care of duty, as lawyers would say. Don't see a toddler walking into a swimming pool and say it is his right to do what he wants to do. This is a toddler. He's going to drown. So duty of care needs to come up. So I think a lot of the legal provisions that we can have. I can even have duty of care and say this fellow is a homosexual himself. But most of them you find actually they don't like it. They are addicted to it. They are just like drug addicts. They need help. Now, should I report? Should I help? Because I can go to police, I can go to a counselor. So does the law allow me to use my judgment and duty of care responsibilities to say, here is a person X, I have two options, police or counselor? Does the law provide for that? So I think we have room for real negotiations to come up with the law that will be acceptable to all parties. We are partners in development. We call the World Bank a development partner. And many others. The World Bank may have been the one that is bold to come out or would be the first. Don't be surprised if another 2 or 3 pop up. Others can easily not even refer to the law. But they will say implementation of my program requires presence of the World Bank. Because I've seen donors who bring their money and hand it over to the World Bank to implement for them. Because for them they have small staff and they want to leverage the World Bank. So those also can come and say, in the absence of the World Bank, I am unable to implement my program. So we need to resolve this as fast as we can.
Professor, thank you very much.
It has been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure.